What's up, everyone? So today we're going to be sitting down and talking to a fellow veteran in the Darknet market space. It's basically none other than Hugbunter himself. This will be a new playlist that will exist that'll be called Hugbunter's High Alerts. They will take place basically whenever he wants to actually make a news announcement or to discuss an issue with the community at large. Which may raise the question, like, why am I being so gracious? Well, in my opinion, he knows more about the darknet markets than basically anyone else alive. And that alone, to me, is a voice worth amplifying if it's in my power to actually do so. The end is where I'll actually give you my opinion, which is obviously rooted in fact and kind of devastating. My take is going to be far more devastating and sharp than anything else that's actually in the interview. Hugbunter remains neutral much of the time. I don't, though. In any case, I've known Hugbunter for probably around 8 or more years now, and I can't remember like the exact date or whatever, but I do remember I was doing public relations for a darknet market on Reddit and basically was a darknet vendor while he was doing security testing and exposing the markets that had bad security and basically refused to fix it. Those are the only ones that he really attacked publicly. Basically, he would expose them if they were putting people in jeopardy. Didn't care that they were putting people in jeopardy. Hugbunter is a positive force on the darknet market scene in general, I would absolutely venture to say. He created Dread, which is one of the world's most popular darknet forums, and that's been up and running now for like 7 years or something like that. Now, I've criticized Dread before on this very channel, and I stick by that, but I also stand by the fact that Hugbunter personally has never done me wrong, and that's why I see him as, to some degree, trustworthy. And again, you should never actually trust anyone. For all those amazing people out there that have liked and subscribed the video and then supported the channel even further by doing things like hitting the bell, I would say that you already know what I'm going to say next. Yes, you're right. Don't trust, verify. Well, I have, in a manner of speaking. For over 8 years, I've known this guy, and we've had our disagreements, absolutely. Most of which, of course, most of the time, I was right. Now, I'm not quite sure he would agree with that, with that statement, but anyways, I digress. Today, we're talking about someone that I'm not really a massive fan of to any degree. We're going to call him Yoshi, or Big Boss. Basically the admin of the world's largest darknet market, which is called Archetype. I've never had an issue with him until he promised the community a $10,000 reward in a contest that was basically impossible to actually win. And when nobody won, I made a video about it saying that the money should be donated. Instead of doing that, the story became that the admin was robbed by an employee. Then Yoshi went on to write this 10-page diatribe about how everything was a conspiracy against him, and that took me basically an hour and a half to actually debunk in another video due to the amount of lies that were actually in it. And after that, he just kind of gave up and started calling me names because he had nothing logical or factual to actually say. Now, like cult members, many of his followers went on to have issues with me for saying a thing that happened. And, who can blame them, right? Like, people who say things that really happened are obviously horrible people. So, in any case, aside from my personal experience, like, we have seen other times when shady or like weird things happened with Yoshi. Like that time on April 29th of 2025, when some script kiddie supposedly claimed to have the ClearNet IP for the market and or its mirrors. And he points out where it's hosted, and he claims to have multiple IPs of the market and its infrastructure, and cites the Cloudflare hosting. Everyone, including me, thought this random script kiddie was a moron. Yoshi came at him, calling him all kinds of names, which is kind of in his wheelhouse, from being retarded to saying he was a DDoSer and Fisher, which kind of sounds like the guy was a jack of all trades, but whatever, we'll put that aside. That was forgotten about until about 5 hours and 25 minutes later, when Yoshi posted a report from Cloudflare saying, and I quote, "Unfortunately, I have confirmed that this post is particularly true, the part with the IP." So that didn't last long. 1 hour and 2 minutes after that, Yoshi admits that the domain got seized, and at that time, his DNS records changed and the CNAME was removed. So 9 days, 2 hours, and 17 minutes later, suddenly more domains get seized. So again, Yoshi goes and drops yet another domain. 5 days, 24 minutes after that, then suddenly another new domain appears that he posts, which is 7 days and 19 hours and 43 minutes. Then on June 7th, he posts that people complain about Dread, but don't make a Dread alternative, which isn't true by any stretch, but he says he feels a healthy alternative would be nice and posts a job for the creation of a Dread alternative on Dread while he complains about how unhealthy Dread is, and it's one of the only sites that he's actually on. There's some real mental gymnastics here, but now that you actually have a backstory on who we're talking about and what he's done and what he's about and all these kind of other things, we can get into the present day, and that's with Hugbunter. Hugbunter made a mega thread about Yoshi and his market. Hugbunter, in his thread, basically says a ton of really interesting things that are worth highlighting a few before we actually get into the interview with him, just so you know and understand the situation. The first one was that the market's guard node, at the very least, would have been given a lot of exposure due to a recent DDoS attack and de-anonymized because of this latest DDoS attack. The second thing was that it's extremely out of character for Yoshi not to give an update, even if he is busy. The third was that there's been zero communication for almost 24 hours from the market or from the market's owner, which is Yoshi. Yoshi has not logged into Dread for 4 days, and the maintenance screen itself is off, meaning it's not pixel perfect and that the text alignment isn't conforming and it looks sloppy, as if it was put up with haste really quickly, which is out of character for the market, which tends to be very particular. The sixth thing was that the ClearNet site was down, which makes no sense given the theory of migration, meaning Yoshi is supposedly moving the site from one place to another. And if he is, then it would only affect the actual .onion site. It wouldn't affect side sites and ancillary sites like the ClearNet domain, which is completely separate infrastructure. The seventh was the maintenance page isn't using any load balancing and is a direct connection to his static page, which is not something that Yoshi would do, as it opens up an entire attack surface for people to try to capitalize on. The eighth and the last point was that Hugbunter points out a post that talks about the market's auto-withdrawal feature, asking if vendors got money sent to them by that feature. And this is a feature that when the market goes down, it's supposed to basically take your money, if you have money in the market, and send it to you automatically. Even if the market's down or whatever issues are actually happening, this means they can never actually exit scam. And that's the purpose of this feature. Now, only one vendor said he actually received anything, and when pressed, he basically was called a liar, and he refused to show any kind of proof whatsoever of this. And, if you make an assertion, if you make a claim, and you refuse to provide any kind of proof whatsoever, then you can be disproven with no evidence whatsoever, right? Like, you can't make a claim and then provide no evidence, and everyone just accepts it. If you make a claim, back it up. If you can't back it up, then your claim can be defeated with the same amount of evidence, right? Like, if the entire infrastructure is down, though, including the ClearNet site, what makes you think the auto-withdraw is going to be the only thing that is left turned on? Makes no real sense, which is why it was number 8. So, with 8 reasons this is something worth worrying about. Like, and let's kind of just put that aside for a minute. Yoshi's history of manipulation and lying is also a cause for concern. So I ended up reaching out to Hugbunter and, first pointing out some issues and then asking for more specifics. And he responded graciously. And that's why this interview that I'm about to go through exists. I saw you put up a mega thread and, it basically pointed out more than a few things. You mentioned that the DDoS attack caused a 4x spike, I think it was, in the Tor network traffic in general. Like, could you walk us through exactly how you're measuring this entire thing and what specific metrics indicate guard node exposure versus just like general network strain?
From the Tor metric site, you can see the current load across the network, from user traffic, hidden services available on the network, and nodes. The last big spike I looked at was around April 29th. I'll try to pull the graph up, but it isn't consistently stored. I may be able to find a screenshot from that time. The spike I saw that day was 4 times above the regular load before the attack started. When multiple sites are being hit, it's not so much of an issue. But at this time, as far as I know, Archetype was the only market being hit by this huge attack. Any targeted attack like that, it can pinpoint the guard node where the traffic is reaching on the network.
You're saying only one market gets hammered like that, and it basically puts a spotlight on their whatever their specific guard is. And that's because all the traffic has to funnel through somewhere. Okay, but like, here's what I'm actually curious about. That dual descriptor thing that you caught with Go Balance, still actually running, but like this janky maintenance page on a separate descriptor. Like, it just sounds really weird. Like, if Yoshi was doing a planned migration, wouldn't he publish 2 completely different descriptors? Like, it seems like either someone else has partial control or something went seriously sideways during the actual migration.
Here is the spike I was referring to. I guess I was misremembering. Closer to 3x. It massively exposes them when it is only them being targeted for sure. Especially because Archetype was previously running on POW protections only, so all connections to the market were essentially direct. He would not need to set up a separate server to host the maintenance screen, or, at the very least, he would point the in-game CAPTCHA to a proxy to the maintenance screen temporarily. This, paired with absolutely no communication from him, of course, doesn't add up.
Okay, all right. So 3x is still really massive, especially when it's just one target, I'd imagine. And yeah, like running proof of work only before this attack then. So that's kind of basically naked in terms of infrastructure exposure, I would imagine, right? Like, the maintenance screen thing is what really kind of alerted me and put me on high alert in regards to this whole thing. Like, he's smart enough to run his market this long. He's definitely smart enough to just redirect endgame to a maintenance page. Like, setting up a whole separate server for that is either panic mode or possibly someone else entirely. Like, you mentioned you hadn't heard from him in 4 days, even before this actually went down. Was he usually pretty responsive when you guys were working on DDoS stuff? Like, did his communication pattern change before this all actually happened, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Running POW only has the same anonymization as any hidden service you spin up. Separation through external load balancing servers means that users only ever access a disposable front server, which then proxies to the backend over Tor. So you're never actually visiting the true backend site. The front servers used for load balancing, where you see an in-game CAPTCHA, can be viewed as a middleman in your destination to the site. You create your handshake with the middleman by filling in the CAPTCHA. The middleman then provides the content of the backend site to you. You are only ever accessing the middleman server directly. I haven't talked to him for a few weeks at this point. Our last discussions were regarding the DOS attack. He formulated a new structure using load balancing based on my recommendations, and then talked with Paris, who helped him get everything set up and shared his knowledge on how best to handle different attacks. This new setup immediately resolved the DOS attack. He was responsive during this as we were helping him. However, it is normal for him to be inactive on Dread for a week or so, occasionally. Some weeks he could be extremely active daily. His being missing for 4 days now is not cause for immediate alarm. However, being unresponsive in this situation and seemingly inactive for such a period doesn't look good. If Archetype ever experienced any issues in the past, he immediately published an update on Dread.
Okay, I got it. So the infrastructure separation should have protected the back end even during that actual massive spike. But if the guard got burned during the attack, none of that actually matters for a migration. Like, they'd still need to move everything, right? Like, that's really telling in some ways. You're saying he'd immediately post on Dread for any issues before, and now it's radio silence during one of the biggest crises that the market's faced. That's not just like a he's busy with migration thing then. It was a planned migration after your DDoS discussion, which makes sense. Like, so would Paris know something, or like at least have gotten a heads up since he helped set up the new infrastructure? Or like, was he even involved? Like, have you checked with him about any recent contact from Yoshi?
He didn't have infrastructure separation due to using POW, so the guard that would be exposed would be the guard for the backend servers. If using external load balancing servers, only them load balancing front servers that host nothing more than the in-game CAPTCHA would be exposed along with their unique guards. These servers are disposable, so it's never an issue. You can rotate them quickly and cheaply. If he had been using load balancing, he would have had the benefits of this protection. However, this also doesn't guarantee that this spike exposed anything. It's just highly likely. So, a migration is necessary as a proactive approach. In the case of using disposable front servers, you set up a bunch of new fronts, which can be mostly automated to install Nginx and Endgame. Provide your backend onion address to Endgame, and then they are running. You just point onion balance or alternatively go balance to these new fronts and burn the old ones. This massively reduces the chances of the attack pointing to the guard node for your backend onion. Still possible, but a lot less likely, especially if the attack is mostly handled at the endgame layer. If the attack can't automatically bypass the CAPTCHA, none of the attack traffic will reach the backend. We have not saw a single instance of the current endgame CAPTCHA being bypassed. We do not use the CAPTCHA on Dread anymore, as the traffic can still be quite accurately filtered, or at the very least the load handled, but you are still being proxied through and endgame front to our backend regardless. Yes, previously, he posted very quickly if any issues were ongoing. Now, he is not even logged in for the past 4 days. Paris didn't help with the new infrastructure as such, just explained how to set up Endgame the best way, and configure it specifically for the attack that was hitting Archetype. His discussions ended once Yosemite knew what he was doing. He stated to me after this that he would migrate the servers, but it's not clear if he did or if this is what we are currently seeing.
So we saw in a thread that was talking about the auto-withdraw feature, asking basically if it was working, if vendors were actually getting their funds, and the first vendor right off the bat said that he was still getting it. Said, yeah, I'm still getting it, like it was an absolute fact, and confirmed it, and, went on to basically talk about how great the site was that wasn't even up. Like, But all the other vendors, essentially, that were in there said that wasn't happening with them. And he was basically the only one in there. And they had people in there calling him out, rightfully so. And he just wouldn't say anything. He, when people pressed him on it and they asked him for proof, he would just say OPSEC. Like, dude, you already disclosed that you got it. Like, it's, even if it's a blurred picture, like, you figured he could share something, if anything. But he just refused to share anything. And, there were people saying that wasn't true. Now, you had mentioned that he was probably lying to try to keep people calm, and I 100% agree with that. But it's idiots like this that actually help these markets screw people over, which is really what annoys me. Or in this case, it might be the feds that he's helping, essentially, which absolutely means like nobody should use this vendor in the future, in my opinion. But aside from that, the maintenance page that he was working on, that he's basically, Yoshi's running one of these sickest interfaces on the Darknet, but suddenly can't get text aligned properly. Like, that doesn't sit well either. Also, does it look like his work under pressure or someone else's like lame attempt at mimicking the actual site? And also, that's not enough. What about the ClearNet mirror actually being down? You said that doesn't fit the migration theory at all, right? So, like, why would moving Onion infrastructure touch the ClearNet site?
It seems he was. That vendor specifically is a prolific poster for pro archetype content. He's a big supporter of that market specifically, as such. I questioned it because the backend is seemingly down, which would likely mean there is no facility for auto-withdrawal to pay out. A good handful of vendors have now confirmed that they have received no auto-withdrawals since the site went down. I think it's safe to say auto-withdrawal is not currently functional. The only plausible explanation is him quickly putting something together for it. But, yes, it's absolutely unlike him and is different from the previous maintenance screen. This appears to be an edit of the login page with the maintenance message added to the bottom. There is zero reason the ClearNet site should be down. It has absolutely no connections to the market's infrastructure and would not be required to be taken down for any migration. The current ClearNet site was set up within the past week, I believe, because multiple of his previous ClearNet sites for sharing market mirrors have had their domain suspended or seized.
Mastro Dutch, or however you pronounce his name, was basically a liar, trying to keep the panic down. And now we've kind of have backwards confirmation that no money's actually moving out. And I wonder if he was, getting paid to do PR. I know for a fact that there are a ton of shills that he pays. The ClearNet site being brand new and then immediately going dark. Like, that timing's pretty suspicious, I think anyways. Like, the domain basically gets set up, probably starts pulling in traffic from people looking for mirrors, and then boom, everything goes down altogether. Like, you've handled a ton of these kind of situations over the years. When you see the back end down, no withdrawals, sloppy maintenance page that looks like it was rushed, and the unnecessary, ClearNet takedown of like a, mirror link site, like, does that match any specific law enforcement playbook that you've seen? Or is this just like something different? Like, what made you even check for that second descriptor, for example? The one that was published. Like, most people wouldn't catch that actual detail.
Market. It's been a common thing for Archetype ClearNet sites to be the target of domain suspensions, and he has had multiple taken down in the past month alone, I believe. There are explanations for most of this still that work, but I also don't believe in coincidences for all of this to happen at once. I think this follows their regular process. They have put multiple markets into a closed stature maintenance mode before actually publishing a seizure page. I didn't even look at the maintenance page when the news of this started to come out on Dread. I mostly ignored the topic. I immediately just assumed it was the planned migraton, which you can justify no communication for, as I had explained in my post. I then saw a later post which suggested progress, because they landed on the CAPTCHA screen. However, when I checked it out, I received the maintenance page directly. This is when I checked to see if I could land on the CAPTCHA page, and that became clear. There are still people commenting now who just got the CAPTCHA page and are assuming there is progressive movement. Without prior knowledge of how onions and their descriptors work, this wouldn't be something obvious to the average user. It wouldn't really be possible to understand what you are actually seeing when switching between receiving either endpoint.
So people are seeing the captchas and thinking, oh, progress, when really they're just hitting different descriptors randomly. That's brutal. It sounds like a lot of false hope that's based on no understanding of the actual tech. Now, you mentioned law enforcement has put markets into maintenance mode before actually, publishing seizure pages or just running them outright. How long does that actually take, or how long does it usually take, I guess? Like, what's the typical window between maintenance and the feds dropping their banner? And going back to that DDoS attack that you said was one of the biggest that you'd seen in a while, who even has the resources to sustain a 3x network spike targeting just one market? Like, that's not just some script kiddie with a local DOS tool, right? Like was his sophistication level consistent with something like state actors or like a rival market or maybe a third party, or just something else entirely that I'm not actually thinking of?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. It depends on the why, rather than just take it down or put up a seizure banner immediately. I can't remember how long it has taken in the past, because usually we are already aware of the seizure at this point. I am pretty sure they put incognito into maintenance after Pharaoh's arrest was announced. The seizure banner came some days after, at least. The attack that hit Dread in, I believe, February was carried out by a Russian botnet group. That attack was the largest we had witnessed since probably 2021 or 2022. Years are blurred together at this point. The only instances we know of where the attacks were this large in the past was the original DDoS attacker that began attacking in 2019 until 2022. He was funded by multiple markets trying to attack each other. So the resources behind his attack were easily explainable. This Russian group, I believe they were a ransomware group, had a huge botnet to utilize for their attack. Aside from that, the only other explanation would be LE potentially carrying out an attack for denonymization purposes. There is no evidence of them doing so ever, as far as I am aware. But I think it would be naive to believe they haven't. It's very easy to find another country that can do so legally. I can't comment on Archetype's most recent attack, outside of the scale of it. Of course, he didn't share any in-depth information for security purposes.
Wait. So you're saying a Russian ransomware group with that level of firepower decided to just hammer his market? Like, that doesn't really make sense. Like, what would be their angle? Like, ransomware groups usually go after money, not the darknet markets, unless someone's actually paying them to do so, right? Like, Killnet or whatever on Pitch was a Russian hacker, more or less, that was advertising DDoS services. So I guess in a way it does make sense in a kind of a backwards way. But like, we're looking at either funded rivals or potential law enforcement using the attack as cover for de-anonymization, I'm guessing. And like, conveniently, right after this massive attack that likely burned their guard, Yoshi goes dark with some janky maintenance setup. Like, how long between this attack ending and this maintenance mode starting did that actually happen? Because if it's like the typical time frame for law enforcement to move from guard identification to server seizure, that was a tongue twister. That would be pretty telling. I would think, anyways. You've seen enough of these to actually know what that window would actually look like. So, do you think that they would be getting paid from a competing market? Also, what would be the red flags if Yoshi did pop up again? Like if the site comes back, or if he drops a message on Dread or something like that.
They were offering DDoS attack services. They originally attacked Archetype shortly after attacking Dread, back in February or early March. So this was them promoting their capabilities back then. It's not clear if they were behind the later sustained attacks against Arch, but it does seem the most likely. In which case, it is possible that this attack was a case of a competitor market paying them. Of course, I don't know that for sure. Killnet was the name. That's who I was referring to. The attack was solved when he upgraded to load balancing sometime in May. It's not clear whether the attack continued, but his servers were simply able to handle the traffic, or if it immediately stopped once he implemented the changes. There are no data points to go off here, unfortunately, for timeframes, because, as far as I remember, they have never admitted to identifying a hidden service in this way. The majority of seizures actively avoid publishing their exact methods. Red flags for his return would have to be unable to sign a message with his PGP key, of course. Change in writing style, unable to verify knowledge of past conversations, poor explanation for the things I have already pointed out, or any changes to the market that could potentially allow identification of users covertly.
Okay, so Killnet, from what I've seen, hits them up for a promotion in February or March or something like that, then possibly gets hired by a competitor for the May attack. Okay, like I could buy that. That kind of makes sense. They proved they could actually hurt the market, so someone with deep pockets said, do it again. So those red flags you listed, that's assuming Yoshi comes back at all, right? But let's say the site returns tomorrow with some explanation about, migration issues or technical problems or any other kind of, oh, look, it was this, thing that we see with that. Beyond PGP verification and writing style, what specific technical challenge would you make as your go-to, or looking at the site oh yeah, this is definitely a compromise? What would you expect if it was law enforcement to suddenly push? Obviously there are major red flags, right? Oh, the site now is JavaScript. That would be a major red flag. Adding BTC to the site or some other kind of thing like that would be a obviously really blatant, massive red flag. But you could also have other more subversive things that were added that could help law enforcement kind of expand out its reach, whether it's staff, they're trying to social engineer staff or whatever, or just reaching out to people or whatever. How would you classify or describe to a regular user what those red flags would be for getting worried? What's the playbook when law enforcement tries to run a market as a honeypot, or has a Darknet market admin against the wall and he's doing whatever to cooperate with them? We saw this with Hansa. Only back end changes actually happened after it went down, and when it came back up, you really couldn't see anything because the changes they had implemented were back end changes, no longer encrypting messages and stuff like that.
Is one way to potentially uncover malicious changes, but it's unlikely they would be so bold. Changes would be intended to go unnoticed, such as back-end changes, as you mentioned, which could be modifying the site's auto-encrypt feature for messages so it stores the original message in plain text. This is something they can do without anyone being made aware. Exposing all messages, shipping addresses, and tracking numbers if they are sent using the auto-encrypt option rather than manually encrypting. Things to look out for, as per Hansa, would be file downloads and product images disappearing. With Hansa, they removed all product images and claimed that the images were corrupted, which forced all vendors to re-upload their images, only this time they could store any XCF metadata held in the images, such as GPS coordinates, if the vendor hadn't manually cleansed the images of this data beforehand. Also on Hansa, they added a CSV file download for vendors' orders as an easy method for them to export all of their current orders. This file contained an image of the Hansa logo, which wasn't embedded in the CSV, but rather hot, linked to an online image hosted at a ClearNet IP, for example. By doing so, any vendor who opened this CSV in a desktop environment that was not entirely routed over the Tor network, they would expose their IP address when this link was requested. Essentially, any vendor using an insecure setup, such as Windows or Mac, without any VPN or Tor routing system-wide, would have loaded up this URL over their real IP, allowing them to be identified. At the time, I pen tested Hansa and actually reported an exposed port. It was at /images/directory, I believe. When accessing this URL, it would redirect and add the port of the hidden service /images. I reported this as a bug unknowingly to LE as they operated the site. This bug occurred only because they had misconfigured the setup when migrating the market to their own servers. While I noted that this was strange, because it hadn't occurred in the past, no one could have guessed the reason for it being that LE were now in control of the market. Based on this, though, anything that is out of place after a suspicious situation like this should not be overlooked. An image being out of place, a font change, a function being broken, not working the same as before. These can all be signs of a change in server environment or configuration. So the lesson here is to be vigilant.
The Hansa CSV trick was definitely clever. It was definitely interesting, too, to see law enforcement basically put malware in CSVs and have it do a callback on ClearNet calls in what looks like a harmless exploit. It was basically malware, which another reason why I always advise people, like, if you're going to use the Darknet, to make sure that when you do it, you don't use your own home network. So that way, if Tor fails, you're not on your network, you can't actually be identified, which everyone that advocates for like VPNs, oh, use a VPN with Tor. Every time I get into an argument with them, the conversation always boils down to them saying, well, if Tor gets de-anonymized, then I'm exposed. And it's like, well, you're only exposed if you're on your home network. So it's a dead giveaway. Anyways, I digress. Anyways, the market had that ClearNet mirror site that basically went down with everything else. If this whole thing comes back online, what would you be looking for regarding that ClearNet domain that might be giveaways? Like, obviously, it, being a ClearNet site and not an Onion, the tells would be different, right? Like, if suddenly it moved to like DigitalOcean or started using, I don't know, Cloudflare. I don't know anything about hosting, but let's say it started using Cloudflare. Would that scream FedOp, like it would suddenly move to DigitalOcean or another provider, that would be a red flag? Or, started using Cloudflare, would that scream to you that it was a federal operation or some kind of thing like that? Like, what hosting providers or configurations would make you suspicious versus what Yoshi would typically use? And to clarify, like, I'm not asking you for bulletproof hosters or to list any of them. And for those listeners that don't understand what bulletproof hosters are, they're basically hosters that know you're doing something illegal and don't really care. They let you run it anyways. So I'm not asking you to list bulletproof hosters, but what would be the red flag hosters? And like any other tells that a Darknet vendor or buyer could easily see, typically from the outside, technology-wise. Like you mentioned that they could, modify something like auto-encrypt to store plain text, like with what Hansa did. How many vendors do you think actually use manual PGP versus, trusting markets auto encryption still? Because if it's compromised, like that's a lot of addresses and, stuff in plain text, which we saw how that went with the Hansa takedown just so many years ago.
As for them adding Bitcoin, while it would be good for them, users would never accept this change from a known XMR-only marketplace.
They screwed up the config during the migration and exposed that port redirect. Like, that's exactly the kind of detail that actually matters when we're having this discussion. Like, those little things break because whoever is running it doesn't actually know the original setup or doesn't understand it intimately, I would say. So have you noticed anything like with Archetype's basically maintenance page beyond that text alignment that you had, cited in your post? Like any resources failing to actually load or pass that seem wrong or functions that feel different? Yeah, I would agree. Like, adding Bitcoin would be self-destruct mode for credibility. But like, what about more subtle things, like more subtle changes anyways? Like, what kind of sneaky data collection could they implement that users might actually go along with? Like, you said that originally you had actually reported the Hansa security bug to law enforcement because they had taken it over. And, obviously you didn't know. No one knew. Looking back, were there any actual interactions or responses that seemed different? Like, now, in hindsight, knowing who you were really talking to then.
You wouldn't really be aware of where the ClearNet site was hosted, and any name servers for the domain would be pointed to whichever CDN the site uses. Cloudflare is a CDN that even we have used for Daunt as a means of DDoS protection, and to keep the hosting IP for the site hidden as much as possible. While that in itself wouldn't be strange, because he has used Cloudflare in the past, it's definitely different. Recently, every ClearNet operator in our space moved to new CDNs, such as DDoS Guard, following Cloudflare's poor handling of false reports, which led to the ClearNet sites becoming inaccessible. So, I wouldn't expect it to be returned to Cloudflare at least. In the maintenance page, there was also the Nginx server header and etag header in the responses. These are signs of a different server environment to what he usually uses. The Nginx server header may have been present, but definitely not an etag header. That was the only other thing that stood out to me, but can be explained by it being a quick temporary server setup just to host this static maintenance page. There are probably many other subtle data points they could collect, as simple as user login times, but with the market being XMR only, no useful payment data can be retrieved. So I don't think there is anything else of significance they could get, unless they start straight up asking users for KYC. No, there would have been no way for me to know. The only responses I had were from support mods, who were still active on the market, also unaware that LE were in control.
So Nginx headers and etag showing up where they shouldn't, like that's exactly the kind of configuration difference that happens when someone else sets up a kind of a quick spin-off mirror of your own infrastructure. Those little fingerprints are the things that really matter. And then I appreciate that because it's actually what I was trying to get to. The DDoS guard being, a new standard after Cloudflare burned everyone also definitely makes sense. So if Archetype comes back on Cloudflare, that'd be a weird choice given the recent history. Like Yoshi ran a tight ship for years, but now we've got like sloppy maintenance pages and wrong headers and dual descriptors and just radio silence in general. In your experience, when markets go dark like this, with all these kind of red flags, what percentage actually come back clean versus compromised or just, not at all? So like if you went to an alternative, like what would be your top 3 choices, if you can speak on that? And like that 4-day gap before going dark, was there anything in like unusual or weird in his last posts on Dread? Like, for example, change in tone or, different word usage or whatever, anything that seemed significant when you look back on it?
I wouldn't be able to give a percentage because situations this specific don't occur often in general. It's usually a clear exit scam, seizure page, or offline over anything else. I am hopeful of it coming back, but I don't believe in coincidences. So, at the very least, I will remain vigilant with things. Nothing unusual in the post, as far as I could see. I haven't paid enough attention to notice anything more subtle. Following him solving the DDoS attacks, I got back to my ridiculous task list and haven't had much time to be active myself. Now I'm here, running on no sleep to try and make sure this situation is under control.
Okay, well, thank you for giving us your time and for helping the people on the ClearNet kind of understand a bit deeper, like how to actually recognize what might be potential red flags with darknet markets regarding things like seizure or odd behavior. I definitely look forward to us being able to hear more from you in the future when things like this happen. One last question for you. Any suggestions on what I should actually call this series? Like when we actually get updates from you regarding big events on darknet markets?
I think the name you suggested fits perfectly, to be honest.
Okay, so it was very cool having that technical breakdown from Hugbunter because it perfectly exposed the kind of cult-like sickness that's really infecting the darknet community in general. When Yoshi finally posted his response, which was like 20 minutes after Hugbunter's detailed analysis and our conversation, he completely ignored every single technical concern raised and provided zero explanation for the AWS, migration, the dual descriptors, or any other red flags. It's also really amazing how it was so immediate after someone expressed concern finally in the community. That wasn't someone that could just be run over with the cold, like, shut up kind of reflex that we usually get. Now, aside from that, this was completely out of character for someone who typically gives detailed, specific updates about when his market faces technical issues. Instead, we got like some just deflection crap. We got, nonsense. We got, generalization. There was no facts or specifics. He basically just said, shut up, I'm busy. And the community's response was absolutely crazy. It was even more disgusting to me because it revealed the divide between evidence and emotion. People totally ignored all the technical evidence and said things like, you're a god, and I just want to kiss your forehead, big man. Love you, bro. Now, notice the pattern here. Everyone who expressed skepticism provided actual evidence like DNS records and timeline analysis and technical expertise, while everyone defending Yoshi just offered pure emotional and, personal attacks because that's all they had. Remember, don't trust, verify. Like, these people are so psychologically broken that they worship someone despite overwhelming red flags. To them, like, it wouldn't even matter if law enforcement was running the site, so long as, like, they had a post by Yoshi every once in a while to pat them on the head. Like, look at the evidence that Hugbunter actually documented, right? Like, Archetype's DNS migration to Amazon Web Services, which requires, by the way, verified identity. Like, Amazon cooperates fully with law enforcement and has been used for seizure notices in the past. AWS hosts a ton of classified government infrastructure, making it the last place any legitimate darknet operator would actually voluntarily host anything. Yoshi himself laughed at Black Hole Market for making this exact same mistake just a few months ago, and rightfully so. It's basically operational self-destruct mode when you do something like this. Yet, when multiple community members said, this is insane, the community absolutely chose to ignore them and trust Yoshi instead, even though the market at the time wasn't even up. It wasn't even functioning at the time. Like, we trust him. The market's still down. Like, it's absolute insanity. The auto-withdrawal scam was even more blatant. Like, that vendor, Mastro Dutch, or whatever his name is, claimed he was receiving payments during the complete back-end downtime. When challenged for proof, he couldn't provide timestamps or like even blurred screenshots. Nothing. Like, notice how he just suddenly started screaming OPSEC to avoid any further discussion. Like, he was happy to give up info by claiming the payments in the first place, right? Like, multiple vendors confirmed that they received absolutely nothing. So basic logic tells you that if the back end is offline, automated payments can't function, right? Like, the community wanted to believe the lie so badly that they accepted it with absolutely no evidence. Like, they all goaded themselves into thinking that every piece of infrastructure went down at the same time. But don't worry, guys. Yoshi made sure that even though everything, including the ClearNet mirror, all went down at the same time, he made sure that auto-withdraw didn't. Yes. And all these people signed up for that lie. Like, these are cult members that really firmly believe what he said. The feature probably doesn't even exist, like, outside of text as a listed selling point feature for the market. Meanwhile, users like Jake0126, who actually raised legitimate technical concerns, got attacked as, quote unquote, paranoid and told to stop spreading FUD. This guy brought actual specific facts about DNS changes, timeline inconsistencies, and infrastructure problems backed by actual evidence, while the cult members responded with just personal attacks and emotional deflection instead of actually addressing any of his actual points. And this is classic cult behavior when someone threatens the group delusion with inconvenient facts. And I know all about it. I could absolutely speak to this as an expert, because when I pointed out that Yoshi never actually paid on his $10,000 scavenger hunt that he had at DEF CON, I got the exact same treatment for months, though. Like, I get stuff sent to my house, all kinds of stuff. So, like, to this day, if you mention my name on Dread, various cult members will flip out. Like, they get triggered just hearing my name. And they still make posts about me, even though, like, I go 6 months without actually posting there. To this day, they still make posts about me. And my favorite post was someone saying that I had bad OPSEC because I had a Gmail address. Like, you can't even make this stuff up. I challenge anyone to be a YouTuber without a Gmail address. Like, I'd love to see it. The psychological manipulation that is occurring is absolutely textbook. Like, Yoshi has, to his credit, cultivated emotional dependency through past generosity stories like the Cocaine Inc. PR's tearjerker about receiving $25,000. And, the point is, he has a ton of shills that are actually on his payroll. And he makes fake accounts all the time. That's something he's admitted to, and I've documented that. And, for example, another great shill is for Shizzle too, who is so dumb, that's how I know it's not Yoshi, is that he doesn't even remove the EXIF data from his pictures that he makes, disclosing that he's actually running Windows. Whether true or fabricated, Yoshi has created a very toxic kind of parasocial attachment that overrode rational thinking, and is still doing that to this day. Like, these people developed emotional relationships with an anonymous stranger handling their money. Like, now keep in mind, this is a guy who only exists to feed off of them. Like, a pimp or a parasite. He takes a small portion of the darknet vendor's transaction. In exchange, provides a place for said transactions to happen. His contribution, though, is feeding off of others. The fact that anyone would see him as some benevolent force is absolutely insane. Think about this like an abusive relationship, okay? The victim defends the abuser even when presented with evidence of harm, undeniable evidence. They make excuses, they attack people trying to actually help them, and they choose comfortable lies over the uncomfortable truths. And that's exactly what we're witnessing here. And all proof is labeled coincidence because accepting a reality would shatter their fantasy. Can you imagine being so psychologically broken that you attack people trying to warn you about documented technical problems that really exist and you can verify it for yourself? It's like getting mad at a road sign warning you of a cliff that's up ahead because you wanted the mountain to continue. Then getting out of your car and yelling at the sign because of it. Users with technical expertise brought evidence-based concerns and got shouted down by cultists literally chanting, "You are God," to the admin. And it's exactly like, a religious mantra that exists with these people. It's beyond pathetic how sad this is. The auto-withdrawal system reveals another level of deception in this whole thing. If payments were really processed during the downtime, why couldn't anyone provide proof? Why was it cool to disclose, yeah, I got a payment, but offer nothing to actually substantiate it, then go dark when people call you out? The whole system creates this false confidence. It's like a casino showing fake jackpot winners to keep people gambling while they ring the machines. The community basically enabled questionable behavior through willful ignorance and demonstrated a really clear pattern that they punish rational skepticism backed by evidence. They reward blind faith based on emotion and completely ignored, security analysis in favor of just blind worship and faith. The entire mantra of the Darknet is don't trust, verify. But this community completely chooses to trust over verify every single time, especially with this particular market. Throughout this entire thing, we've had skeptics that provided technical documentation or infrastructure analysis or vendor confirmations, while supporters offered things like personal testimonials and emotional appeals and attacks on anyone questioning their narrative. The sickness runs deeper than just a simple distrust. These people demonstrate severe cognitive dissonance, rejecting evidence that conflicts with their moral beliefs. They show parasocial attachments to anonymous strangers handling their money. They engage in tribal thinking where questioning Yoshi becomes attacking the actual community itself. And when people present verifiable facts about technical problems and your response is to attack them, as paranoid, delusional people, instead of addressing their actual evidence, you've demonstrated a serious psychological problem yourself. Throughout the entire situation, critics brought evidence, supporters brought feelings, and the community chose feelings over facts every single time. And, they're still there doing it. If you want to have some fun, hop over there and just start saying random things about the market, it's an exit scheme. Just watch them. Just flip out. Shut up. Don't say that here. How dare you contradict our Lord and Savior? And, my point is they're still doing it. And if and when the market comes back online, they'll cite that as their savior's, validation of them actually being who they are. they'll be like, oh, look, he's back. We told you. See, Yoshi, we're the best followers. That's how they go. It's absolutely pathetic. One thing is a fact, though, and that's that one day the market's going to go down and it's not going to come back. Like, the odds are about 90% in favor that the market will exit scam at some point. And that's not like based on Yoshi or anything like that. This is just based on what darknet markets do. Like, this is based on history. It's based on facts. Darknet markets work because everyone maintains distrust. The second that you actually start trusting market operators, you've created psychological conditions for you to be manipulated and messed with mentally. Like, darknet markets are not charitable organizations. They're not your friends. Like, the people who run them are not your buddies. The level of psychological dysfunction absolutely deserves exposure. And that's the reason for this whole rant, and I'll end it there, as it's definitionally, it's a cult. That's what it's turned into. And it's just really sad to see, basically. In any case, thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoy this, if you got value out of this, please like and subscribe. That does a ton for the channel. It supports the channel without you actually having to support the channel. And in any case, I'll see you in the next video.